water. So I just want to share with you why I decided to go on strike. So I want to tell you a little bit myself. I'm, as you can tell, a daughter of a migrant. I was born in Sheffield in the 60s, and my dad was a migrant worker. He worked in the foundries, and he lost his the top half of his fingers, to his fingers, from working in foundries because there were no unions where he worked. He also he's lost his hearing because of the big hammers that were used in the foundries. And also he worked in a factory where they sprayed oil into the air. He worked in a factory where they made measuring tapes, and there was always the smell of oil in the air. And as a result of that, he has now breathing problems. He got me my first job in that factory, and I was on that shop floor and I saw the conditions. And I also saw how women were more exploited by men. So that was the background that I came from. But in the 80s I saw, as a young person, the miners marching through Sheffield, led by Arthur Scargill. And I saw how, together, backed by the unions, how the miners fought for workers' rights. And I saw how important that was, especially seeing how my father in his factories, there were no workers' rights. And so I grew up seeing the strength of the unions and being inspired by the miners. I spent most of my life working in charities, and it's, for me, every single day, me and my colleagues, we work in shelter, fighting for people who are facing housing crisis. And increasingly that job has become more and more difficult because it's the same people that are facing the housing crisis, that are facing fuel poverty, that are facing food poverty. And every single day we work in that tough environment, and it's becoming more and more difficult, but we do that job, we're committed to it. We don't do it for the money because, as Alistair said, people in charities were often paid precarious wages, contracts are short term, but we do it because we care. But there comes a time when, whilst you fight for others, you realise you also have to fight for yourself, especially when you and your colleagues are facing some of the same issues that people you're fighting for are facing. So we have colleagues who are relying on food banks, we have colleagues who are relying on other charities, and as charity workers we feel we shouldn't be in that position. And so with the cost of living crisis, we were faced with a situation where we went to management and we asked for pay increases, given the fact that our own managers are talking about the cost of living crisis, and we were offered 3%. And it was a very difficult decision for us to go on strike, because I know, like myself, many of my colleagues were so committed to the people that we're working with. We want to make sure we're there for the helplines. But it was a very difficult situation, and 80% of Unite members voted for strike. That was the power of the feeling within the movement. But what a lot of my colleagues, they're younger, and what they have been inspired by is seeing CWU, is seeing RMT, is seeing the strength of other unions out on the streets. And that's inspired them. And just like I was inspired by the miners, I'm seeing that young people who never taken strike action are being inspired by other unions who are fighting for rights. And it's really important that we carry on, we have those picket lines, and we inspire other people who have never taken strike action, because they see power in that, they see there is a movement, they see that people are fighting for workers' rights, and that's what's inspired us. Because Shelter's not a massive charity. We are big, we are in other cities, but actually compared to CWU and RMT and other unions, UCU, we're not that big, but we saw the strength, and we're seeing the strength in workers around the country, and that's inspired us to take that action. So the union called for a 2-week strike. Halfway through the second week, our management went back to ACAS, and we were settled on an increase, and a consolidated pay increase. So our strike won. And I think the message is, if we hadn't taken that strike action, we wouldn't have won. And so we've seen the importance of taking that strike action. We're obviously still going to go into next year's negotiations, but with a consolidated pay offer, which would never been on the table if we hadn't taken strike action. I've got a message of solidarity. It's in the form of a poem to all of the strikers in our city and across the country who've inspired us within Shelter and continue to inspire us. And I wrote this because I was thinking about how within Shelter that we are expected to give from an empty cup, and there comes a time when you just can't give anymore. So it's called an ode to the strikers, and it's called Raise Your Empty Cups. We can't keep pouring from an empty cup. We care about helping others, but we've simply had enough. We've been squeezed by the bosses and there's nothing more to give. Winter sets in summer when you can't feed your kids. We worked every hour trying to pay the bills. Now our debts look like mountains when once they looked like hills. We watched their profits rise, but the windfall's not for us, even when we show them how empty are our cups. Hanging heads low, we joined the food bank queues, only to realise there are other workers here too. The backbone of this country, now forced upon our knees, overworked and underpaid, tired, cold and hungry. But the resolve of the workers has a stronger spine. Unbent by the unions, we join the picket line. With dignity we stand and look them in the eyes. The workers united can never be undermined. We see their cups are overflowing and enough is not enough. So we're coming for their profits and we're filling our empty cups. So rise all you workers, don't break the picket line. You right a wrong in history when you organise and fight. Hold steadfast and be certain, no worthier fight exists than breaking into barrels so everyone can sip. Hold steadfast all you workers, never be dismayed. Every single worker deserves roses and decent pay. So rise all you workers, hold that picket line. You write a line in history when you organise and fight. Hold steadfast and be certain, no worthier fight exists than smashing the barrels so everyone can sip. Solidarity to all the workers.